I found the original trust document my late husband Leo had hidden in a false bottom toolbox, the very toolbox my son Stephen had tossed to the curb as worthless, and today Stephen spends every weekend in a striped jumpsuit and a fool's cap, picking up golf balls, while mechanical replicas of him reenact his forgery on every hole of a miniature golf course I own. That is not a metaphor. That is putt it right mini golf, and every putt is a victory lap for the mother who was supposed to be too old to fight back, too foggy to notice, too fragile to ever hold a pen and say no. My name is Margaret Green. I am 61 years old now, but when this started I was 59, and for 3 decades I sat behind a teller window at First Mutual Bank, verifying signatures, catching check kiting schemes, and balancing ledgers down to the penny. I can still recite the 12 points of the Treasury Department's signature comparison protocol. Slant, speed, letter spacing, baseline alignment, pen pressure, hesitation marks, the way an honest hand flows and a fraudulent one trembles, because the brain is trying to copy a shape it did not learn by muscle memory. My late husband Leo was a contractor who could frame a house from the ground up, rewire a breaker panel blindfolded, and never threw away a single receipt. His battered red toolbox, the one with the dent in the corner from the time he dropped it off a scaffold on a job site, had a false bottom he had shown me once on a rainy afternoon in our garage. He lifted the tray and said, "Maggie, if I am ever not here, check under the tray. What is there will be more valuable than gold." I laughed and handed him a fresh mug of black coffee, the way he liked it, but I never forgot the exact 3 clicks the latches made when the tray seated correctly. That CD I mentioned, the one I cashed out for $105,000, I had built it with automatic payroll deductions of $50 a week for 20 years, never touching a cent, watching the balance inch upward like a second heartbeat, because Leo and I grew up poor and we knew the value of a lined ledger and a locked drawer you did not open until the storm came. Leo passed away on a Tuesday in March, a massive heart attack while he was in that same garage, a socket wrench still in his hand and a half-finished birdhouse on the workbench. I found him there, and my world collapsed into the smell of motor oil and the cold concrete under my knees. The paramedics were kind. The funeral home filled with neighbors who brought casseroles in foil pans. I walked through those days in a thick fog, wearing his old flannel shirt to sleep. Within 24 hours of the funeral, before I could even pack away his shirts, my son Stephen and his wife Brittany showed up at my door. Stephen was my only child, Leo's golden boy, a man who had never held a job longer than a year because the world supposedly never recognized his potential. Brittany was all sharp angles and designer labels, a real estate agent who said things like optimize the asset and curb appeal as if they were prayers. She wore a black sheath dress that cost more than my first car, and her heels clicked on my kitchen linoleum like tiny hammers. They did not come to cry. They came with a clipboard and a laptop, their faces set in expressions of efficient sorrow. While I was still foggy with grief, clutching a half-empty cup of cold coffee, they took over my dining room, sorting through Leo's papers, tossing things into heavy-duty contractor bags without a second thought. Brittany held up his high school football jersey, the one with the number 12, and said, "Nobody wants this, it smells like a garage," and dropped it in the bin. I watched it disappear into the black plastic, and a part of me went with it. Stephen went to the garage and started clearing out Leo's workshop. I heard the clang of tools being thrown into a dumpster, the screech of metal dragging across concrete, the casual destruction of a lifetime of skilled labor. I shuffled out and saw the red toolbox on the curb, already mixed with broken drywall and a rusted saw blade. Stephen saw me looking and his jaw tightened. "Mom, it is just old rusty junk. We need to clear space for when we sell this place. You cannot live here alone with all these memories." I said nothing, but my jaw tightened. That night after they left and the streetlights flickered on, I went outside in my slippers, the asphalt cold and gritty under my feet. The toolbox was heavy, and when I dragged it back into the garage, the casters squeaked like a wounded animal. I set it on the workbench, clicked open the 2 brass latches, lifted the top tray with a flathead screwdriver, and there it was. A false bottom, a thin plywood panel coated in dust that smelled like old pine and metal shavings. Beneath it, a sealed manila envelope with my name in Leo's blocky handwriting. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside, a single sheet of yellow legal paper, folded twice. The note read, "Maggie, do not trust Stephen. If he ever asks you to sign something, remember I set up the Fairway Trust. You are the sole trustee. He cannot touch it without you. Be smart, I love you." Alongside the note was a copy of a trust document titled Leo's Land Trust, dated March 14, 2017, listing a property I had not even known he owned. an abandoned miniature golf course on 5 acres out on Route 9, with a faded sign that read Fairway Acres. The trust stated that upon Leo's death, the property vested in me outright, with a built-in poison pill. Any sale or transfer required my notarized signature, personally, in front of an independent notary. Without it, any deed was void. I sat on the cold concrete floor of the garage, the note trembling in my hand, and I remembered a Sunday drive years earlier when Leo had pointed to that very lot, overgrown with weeds and darted with faded windmills and a cracked fiberglass clown, and said, "Someday someone is going to turn that into pure magic." I had not known he bought it. I had not known he planned for this very moment, but I understood now. Leo had known his son, and he had built me a fortress I could not see until I needed it. Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you believe that the people who are supposed to love you should never be the ones setting you up to take a fall. The very next morning, Stephen and Brittany arrived with a business proposal that they had printed on thick bond paper with an embossed seal, like a diploma from a school that taught fraud. They had found the deed to Fairway Acres among Leo's papers, and I could see the gleam in Stephen's eye. "Mom, this is perfect. A family project. We can renovate the course, call it Putt It Right, and you can live on site in a sweet little cottage. It will honor Dad's memory." Brittany chimed in, "And I can handle the branding. We will make it a vintage experience. You will be the heart of the business, Mrs. Green." They laid out a partnership agreement, notarized by a mobile notary they had brought along, a bored woman in a polyester blazer who stamped everything without reading a word. The document said I would invest my $105,000 CD to fund the renovation, and in return I would own 50% of the new LLC, Putt It Right Holdings, plus a lifetime leaseback on a cottage they would build on the property, a 1-bedroom with a porch overlooking the 18th hole and a cupola with a weather vane. I played along. I let my eyes go soft, my voice turn reedy, and I nodded like a compliant, grieving widow. "That sounds good, dear. I just want something to remember your father by." I signed their partnership agreement with my proper signature, the one with the fat loop on the G in green, knowing full well it had no power to override the trust. But I did not tell them I had the trust document. I did not mention the toolbox or the note. I hid the envelope under the driver's seat of my old sedan, wrapped in a wool blanket, and I locked the car every night. They took me to First Mutual Bank the next day, my old branch, where a young teller named Claire who had trained under me looked up with surprise but recovered quickly. I played the confused elder, asking her to explain the early withdrawal penalty for a CD 3 times, while Stephen tapped his fingers on the counter, his knuckles going white. I signed the cash-out form with a deliberately shaky hand, making the M in Margaret wobble. I exchanged a brief knowing glance with Claire as she processed the cashier's check, and I handed the check to my son. I watched him fold it into his wallet with a smile that did not reach his eyes. Then they moved me into a small rental apartment near the construction site, a beige box with thin walls and a single window that faced a dumpster, supposedly to keep an eye on me. In reality, it was to control my access to information, to keep me away from any paperwork that might reveal what they were really doing. I played the part. I shuffled around in a quilted robe, watched game shows, and occasionally asked vague questions about the progress of the course. But every night after the 11 o'clock news, I would sit at the tiny kitchen table and jot notes in a pocket ledger I had kept since my teller days, recording dates, overheard snippets, and my own observations in tiny, precise handwriting that no one could read but me. Over the next 8 months, the course took shape. I was invited to watch from a safe distance while crews laid new turf, installed whimsical obstacles, a windmill with fiberglass blades that actually turned in the breeze, a castle with a working drawbridge that clanked when you hit the right target, a mechanism connected to a pressure plate, a dinosaur whose mouth opened to swallow a golf ball, its jaw on a spring-loaded hinge. But I started noticing financial red flags almost immediately. Brittany would take frantic phone calls on the back porch of the construction trailer, her voice shrill about cash flow and overruns. I once heard her say through a crack in the window, "No, we cannot make that payment. We will just refinance through Apex again. They do not check the collateral that hard if you pay the points up front." Stephen dodged calls from a Mr. Henderson repeatedly, letting them buzz to voicemail while he stared at the screen and then shoved the phone in his pocket, his face pale as a sheet of drywall. They bought a brand new Cadillac Escalade, pearl white with tan leather interior and a heated steering wheel, despite claiming the renovation was tight on funds. One day I saw the window sticker on the Escalade, still tucked in the glove box when I accidentally needed a tissue. The purchase price was $82,000, plus an extended warranty. Then, about 4 months after the funeral, they insisted I move out of the rental and into a room in their finished basement, a control tactic dressed up as concern. "It is not safe for you alone, Mom. We want you with us." My new room had no windows, just a single bare bulb with a pull chain, a fold-out couch that smelled of mildew, and a door that locked from the outside with a simple twist knob. I hid the toolbox, wrapped in a blanket, in the trunk of my old sedan, which I parked on the street 2 blocks away to avoid suspicion. I settled into the role of the fragile, grateful mother who could barely remember what day it was. Living in their home gave me access I could never have had before. I woke at 4 every morning before the cleaning lady arrived, and I went through their kitchen trash with latex gloves I had lifted from a medical supply cabinet in the bathroom. I became a forensic accountant of their waste. One Wednesday, I found a garbage bag stuffed with shredded documents, cross-cut by a commercial machine into fine diamond-shaped confetti, not the simple strip cut of a home office shredder. The bag was heavy, and when I lifted it, I could see through the plastic the glint of high-grade paper. I emptied it onto a bedsheet in my basement room, locked the door from the inside with a jury-rigged doorstop made from a rolled-up bath towel, and began the slow work of reconstruction. I sorted by color first. White office paper, yellow legal paper, pink message slips, then by edge pattern. The cross-cut diamonds have a distinct machine fingerprint, and you can sometimes match them by the way the blades slice the fibers. I used tweezers from my sewing kit and a magnifying glass with a built-in LED, the kind Leo used to inspect solder joints. It was a painstaking jigsaw puzzle that took me 6 hours over 2 nights, but my bank teller eyes can detect alignment discrepancies that most people would miss. I arranged the slivers on the sheet like a mosaic, securing them with tiny darts of restickable glue I had bought at a craft store with cash. Finally, I had rebuilt enough to read the header. Apex Bridge Capital Loan Agreement. The document was a predatory hard money loan for $250,000, with an interest rate of 18% that ballooned to 32% after 6 months, secured against fairway acres, and the cosigner page bore my forged signature. I knew it was forged immediately because the loop on the G in my last name, Green, was missing. I always, even under duress, draw a distinct fat loop, almost a flourish, a remnant of a calligraphy class I took in my 20s. This signature was a tight, cramped scrawl that looked like Stephen's rushed hand, the way he would sign a birthday card in 10 seconds flat. I held the magnifying glass over the ink and saw uneven pen pressure, hesitation marks, a tiny blob where the pen had paused, and a slight tremor that indicated the forger was trying to copy an unfamiliar shape. I photographed the reconstructed document on my phone, using a portable LED lamp to eliminate shadows, then carefully packaged the shreds back into a fresh bag, and filed the images in a secure cloud folder under a new email account with 2-factor authentication. I was building a case, and my old bank training told me that paper trails are the only things a liar cannot talk his way out of. A second alarm came from the mail. When the postal carrier arrived each day, I would volunteer to bring the stack in from the box, using the brief moment to scan for unfamiliar envelopes. The carrier, a young man named Derek, thought I was just a helpful old lady. One day I spotted a thick letter from a local credit union addressed to Putt Right Holdings, Atten, Stephen Cole. Inside, after a careful steam opening with a tea kettle I kept in my room, I found a notice of default on a second mortgage they had taken out, again with my forged signature as a co-borrower. The balloon payment of $43,000 was due in 90 days. The interest rate was 19.5%. I photographed every page and resealed the envelope with a glue stick, making sure the flap aligned perfectly with the original crease. Then I began noticing daily behavior that made my skin crawl. I would hear Stephen in his office, his voice low and urgent, saying things like, "She is completely in the dark, just sign the papers and we are done." Brittany, on speakerphone with the developer, said, "The old lady is harmless. She thinks she's going to live in a cottage and bake cookies." I stood behind the door, my hands in the pocket of my house dress, and I wrote every word in my ledger with the date and time. I staged a small household accident to test the layout of the home office. One evening, I accidentally knocked over a heavy ceramic vase in the hall, one Brittany had bought at a high-end decor store. It shattered into 100 pieces, water spreading across the hardwood. While they scrambled for a dustpan and Brittany swore under her breath, I noted the lock on the office door. A cheap interior knob with a simple pin tumbler, the kind you can open with a credit card or a Barbie pin if you know how. I had not forgotten Leo's lockpicking lesson from a winter when our front door froze solid, and he taught me to rake a lock. "This is not for burglary, Han, it is for survival," he had said, showing me how to apply tension with a screwdriver and feel the pins set with a paper clip. He had me practice on our own basement door until I could open it in under 2 minutes. A few nights later, while Stephen and Brittany were at a wine tasting for the Chamber of Commerce, an event they had bragged about for weeks, I went to work. I bent a barbie pin into a rake, using my sewing scissors to shape the tip into a slight curve, and used a small flathead screwdriver from my glove compartment as a tension wrench. I inserted the screwdriver into the keyway, applied gentle clockwise torque, and raked the pins with the barbie pin, listening for that soft click as each pin set above the shear line. The first pin gave a faint tick. The second pin felt mushy, so I eased off the tension and started again. It took 4 minutes and 30 seconds, my heartbeat steady but heavy in my ears, my breath fogging the brass. The lock turned with a satisfying snick. Inside, a 2-drawer filing cabinet was unlocked. I found the original partnership agreement with a sticky note attached in Stephen's handwriting. Phase 2, transfer full ownership to me after Reno. Mom will not notice. Beside it lay a freshly printed quitclaim deed, dated 2 weeks earlier, transferring my 50% share to Stephen's LLC. My forged signature was already scanned onto it, a pixelated image lifted from a previous document, the edges slightly blurred if you looked closely. Next to the deed was a letter from Pinnacle Properties, a regional developer, printed on heavy letterhead with a gold embossed logo, offering $800,000 for the land, pending approval to rezone for condominiums. A yellow sticky note in Stephen's handwriting read, "Bulldoze the cottage tomorrow, it is an eyesore. We will tell her it was structurally unsound, and we will rebuild it better." I learned later they had already knocked down the half-built cottage while I was at a routine doctor's appointment, and I had not even noticed because the construction site was fenced off, and I had been told the framing was just delayed. I stood in that dark office, the streetlight casting long shadows through the blinds, and I felt a cold rage settle in my chest like a stone dropped into deep water. I photographed everything, closed the drawers, and relocked the office, leaving no trace. I now had enough to act, but I needed an ally who could turn my paper evidence into a legal weapon. I drove to the library the next morning, retrieved the toolbox from my trunk while pretending to browse the gardening section, and in the privacy of the library's single-occupancy study room on the 2nd floor, I pried up the false bottom again. Tucked beside the trust document and the note, Leo had placed a business card for Marion Cross, attorney at law, trusts and estates. On the back, in faded blue ink, he had written, "She is tough. Tell her Leo sent you." I called from a payphone outside a gas station 2 towns over, my voice steadier than I expected. Marion's gravelly voice answered on the 3rd ring. I explained everything in one long, practiced breath. She listened without interrupting, and when I finished there was a pause. Then she said, "Margaret, that trust is a fortress. It is an irrevocable spendthrift trust with a specific condition precedent, your notarized signature on any conveyance. Without it, any deed is void. If Stephen filed a fraudulent deed, he has committed a federal crime, not just a civil fraud. I am bringing in someone I know at FinCEN." 2 days later, I sat in a drab conference room at Marion's office, the walls lined with law books that smelled of old paper, facing a tall, quiet man named Agent Reyes from the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network. He wore a grey suit, and had the kind of eyes that did not believe anything until you proved it. I laid out my evidence on the table, the photos of reconstructed loan documents, the forged deed, the notarized trust, my handwritten timeline in the pocket ledger, and the audio clips I had recorded on my phone of Stephen and Brittany arguing about cash flow. Reyes studied the signature comparisons under a loupe, his breathing slow. "The loop on the G is a dead giveaway, but I want to hear about your procedure for the shredded documents," he said. I walked him through it step by step. He listened, then nodded. "We will get a questioned documents examiner to confirm the forgery, but you have done excellent work, Mrs. Green. This is a textbook financial exploitation case." Then he outlined a plan. The closing with Pinnacle Properties was scheduled for Friday at Steadfast Title Services. They wanted me to go to that closing as if nothing was wrong, wearing a wire. When the title closer asked me to verify my signature, I would refuse, and his team would move in. Marion handed me a digital recorder the size of a postage stamp, with a microphone that could be adhered to the inside of my bra strap. I practiced in the bathroom mirror, whispering test phrases until the pickup was perfect. The gain adjusted so my voice would be clear even if I spoke softly. 2 days before the closing, I needed to test them one last time, to see if there was any glimmer of human decency left. I faked a medical emergency. It was a Saturday morning, and both Stephen and Brittany were in the kitchen, dressed for a pre-closing brunch with the developer at a country club. I put on a loose house dress and went upstairs, my steps deliberately slow. I poured myself a glass of water from the filter pitcher, took 2 steps, and then let out a strangled gasp, a sound I had practiced in the basement. "My chest," I whispered, and I collapsed onto the cold ceramic tile, my hip slamming against the floor, my shoulder hitting the corner of the island. I let my body go completely limp, my eyes slitted open a crack. I could see the dust bunnies under the fridge. Brittany shrieked, "Stephen, your mom!" Stephen rushed in, saw me, and his face twisted not in fear but in furious annoyance. "Oh, for God's sake, not now, she is faking. She has been fine all week. I saw her walking around the backyard yesterday." Brittany hesitated, her phone half raised. "We should call 911, she might be really hurt. What if she hits her head?" Stephen snapped and missed the closing. "We lose everything, look at her. She is breathing fine, no foam, no blue lips. She is just trying to stop us because she is scared of change." He stepped directly over my legs, his loafer brushing my calf, snatched the manila folder from the counter and said, "Let's go, Brittany. If she is still here when we get back, we will deal with it. She does this kind of thing for attention." The front door slammed. I heard the SUV engine start and pull away, the sound of the garage door closing. I lay on the cold tile, counting my own breaths, waiting a full 3 minutes. No ambulance, no phone call. I got up slowly, my hip throbbing where I had actually bruised it, and I poured the water down the sink. I looked at my reflection in the dark window and said aloud, "That was the last time you will ever step over me." Then I called Agent Ray's on the burner phone he had given me, and confirmed I was ready. The closing was at a sterile title company in a strip mall, the kind of place where the fluorescent lights hum like insects and the coffee tastes like scorched rubber. Agent Ray's had his team set up in an unmarked surveillance van in the parking lot, with Marion waiting in a nearby coffee shop, nursing an Americano and reading a brief on her tablet. I wore a plain navy blouse with the recorder taped securely beneath the strap, and I carried a cane I did not need, leaning on it heavily as Stephen guided me inside with a hand on my elbow that felt more like a clamp. Brittany flanked us, her smile tight as a drum. The title closer, a kind-faced woman named Mrs. Henderson with reading glasses on a chain, sat us at a long laminate table and slid over a stack of documents half an inch thick. The forged quitclaim deed was on top, crisp and official, with a notary stamp from a service Stephen had apparently paid off, a stamp with a seal that looked slightly off-center. "All right," Mrs. Henderson said, "we just need Mrs. Green's signature on the deed and the affidavit of title to finalize the transfer. Then the funds will be released." She placed a ballpoint pen beside the deed. It was a cheap pen with a bank logo. Stephen nudged my arm. "Go ahead, Mom, just sign where it says you have done it 100 times. I picked up the pen. I could feel the weight of it, the smooth plastic. I set it down deliberately. I looked at the signature block. My name was already filled in with that cramped, fraudulent scrawl. I spoke clearly, my voice no longer frail. "This does not look right." I pulled my driver's license from my purse and placed it next to the deed, right on top of the signature line. I have spent 3 decades authenticating signatures for a living. I know my own. The loop on the G is missing, the slant is wrong, the pen pressure is uneven, the baseline wobbles. That is not my signature, and I never signed this deed. Mrs. Henderson blinked, her pen hovering. Stephen's face went white as a sheet of paper. "Mom, what are you talking about? You are confused. You signed everything weeks ago. You were right there." The notary was a family friend. I reached into my purse again and removed the original trust document, the yellow paper slightly crinkled but still legible, the notary seal on it crisp and legitimate. "My late husband left this trust. I am the sole trustee. The property cannot be transferred without my notarized signature in person on a deed that I have approved. This document is a forgery and the sale is void." I handed the trust to Mrs. Henderson, who scanned it with growing alarm, her reading glasses slipping down her nose. At that moment the conference room door opened without a knock. Agent Ray stepped in, his badge on a chain around his neck, flanked by 2 uniformed officers and a forensic accountant carrying a laptop. "Stephen Cole, Brittany Cole, you are under arrest for elder financial abuse, forgery, mail fraud, wire fraud, and conspiracy to commit real estate fraud." Stephen lunged across the table for the deed, his fingers clawing at the paper, but an officer restrained him easily, his wrist twisting behind his back with a soft click of handcuffs. Brittany started sobbing. It was all Stephen's idea. He made me do it. The developer's representative, a man in a charcoal suit named Mr. Tillman, stared at the scene as if a hurricane had blown through his spreadsheet. Mrs. Henderson pressed a panic button under her desk, and within minutes the escrow funds at the title company were frozen, the wire to Pinnacle was halted, and my recorder had captured every single word. The legal proceedings revealed a web of deception that even I had not fully mapped. My testimony, supported by the trust, the photographs, and the questioned documents analysis from a certified expert, made the case rock solid. The expert testified that the forgery displayed numerous indicators of traced imitation, including hesitation marks, pen lifts in unnatural places, and a uniform stroke width inconsistent with freehand writing. Stephen was convicted on 7 federal counts and sentenced to 4 years in federal prison, plus 3 years of supervised probation, and an order to pay restitution of $105,000, plus $40,000 in legal fees. Brittany flipped on him and received probation, but her real estate license was permanently revoked, and she was ordered to complete 200 hours of community service, which she had to do in a public-facing role at the county assessor's office, filing records. The court voided the fraudulent sale to Pinnacle Properties and vested the entire Fairway Acres property back to me, free and clear. The developer, caught in the crossfire, had already demolished the cottage and disturbed the land, including tearing down the old scoreboard and filling in a pond. Rather than fight a messy civil suit, Pinnacle agreed to a settlement. They would purchase the entire 5-acre parcel from me for $600,000 and then simultaneously sell me back a 2-acre portion encompassing the miniature golf course for $400,000, with both transactions closing on the same day at the same title company. They also paid me an additional $200,000 in damages for the destruction and the legal cloud they had created through their negligence. So in a single afternoon, I received a cashier's check for $600,000, plus a separate settlement check for $200,000, and I immediately used $400,000 of that to repurchase the mini golf parcel. I walked out of the title company that day with a deed to the course in my name, the remaining funds in a newly opened high-yield account at a credit union, and a feeling I had not felt since Leo was alive. Absolute quiet control, but I was not finished. I hired a firm called Whimsy Works, a team of animatronic engineers who had built singing characters for theme parks and haunted attractions, and I told them I wanted an 18-hole miniature golf course where every hole featured a fully automated mechanical figure of Stephen, caught in a cycle of comeuppance. I had sketches on graph paper, with notes about timing and motion sensors. They looked at my drawings, the lead engineer a bearded man named Gus who wore a tool belt with a rubber chicken hanging from it, and he said, "Lady, this is the most satisfying job we have ever been pitched." Over the next 6 months, we rebuilt the course from the ground up. The first hole features a fiberglass Stephen crouched behind a fake granite boulder. When your ball passes a motion sensor, a security camera on a pole whirs to life, a red light blinks, and a recorded voice I voiced myself booms, "Identity theft is not a game." A foam gavel swings out from behind a bush and bonks him on the head, making him drop the deed, which flutters on a hidden loop that recycles the same piece of paper. The third hole places him in a jail cell made of 4-foot-tall golf pencils painted yellow with pink erasers, their points sharpened to dull nubs. A pressure pad triggers a speaker that plays a recording of Stephen's own voice, taken from a voicemail I had saved, saying, "I should have listened to my mother." The 7th hole is my favorite because it involves a massive 9-foot gavel on a pneumatic hinge that smashes a fake deed into confetti. A puff of compressed air blasts the confetti over the green, just as your ball rolls through a tunnel shaped like a courtroom. The 13th hole has an animatronic gopher wearing a tiny sheriff's badge and a 10-gallon hat. It pops out of a hole on a scissor lift, chases Stephen in a circle on a rotating turntable that is half submerged in artificial grass, snatches the deed from his hand with a magnetic snap, and disappears underground with a mechanical squeak. The 18th hole is the grand finale. You putt into a clown's mouth painted on a wooden cutout, and once the ball drops into the final cup, a proximity sensor triggers a deep, theatrical voice that echoes across the whole course. Forgery is a mulligan you do not get. Then a trapdoor opens beneath the jester-dressed Stephen mannequin, which is actually a lightweight foam figure with articulated arms, and it falls into a pit of colourful foam balls while a laugh track plays and a strobe light show fires off. The entire course cost $300,000 to build, and it opened on a Saturday in May to a line of families that stretched to the parking lot and wrapped around the corner. And here is the best part. The judge, a woman with steel-grey hair named Judge Callahan, who had seen every kind of scam, read the probation report and added a special condition. As part of his community service requirement, Stephen must work at Putt right every Saturday and Sunday from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m., dressed as the forgetful felon. He wears a black and white striped jumpsuit with a jester hat that has bells on the tips, the kind that jingle with every movement, and a placard around his neck that reads in bold letters, "I stole from my mom." His job is to collect stray golf balls, pick up litter, and greet every customer through a megaphone with the phrase, "Welcome to Putt It Right. I am the forgetful felon. Listen to your mother." If he refuses, if he skips a shift, or if a customer complains that his attitude was not sufficiently penitent, his probation officer will haul him straight back to prison. So every weekend he is out there, the bells jangling with every reluctant step, while children point and giggle and teenagers snap selfies with him. The local paper did a feature, and a travel podcast called The Course, the most satisfying miniature golf experience in the country. I sit in the clubhouse, a small building with a window overlooking the 18th hole, sipping lemonade from a mason jar and watching. Leo's photo sits on the sill, a picture of him grinning in his hard hat. Some afternoons I wave. Stephen has to wave back, and I can see the humiliation burning in his eyes, but his hand rises nonetheless, a puppet on the strings of a court order. The restitution lien against any future earnings means that even after he finishes his shifts, a percentage of every paycheck he ever earns will come to me. I do not need it, so I donate it to an elder fraud prevention nonprofit in Leo's name, a group that runs hotlines and legal clinics for seniors who are being scammed by their own families. Leo always said that integrity is the only equity that never depreciates, and he was right. He planned for this long before I knew anything was wrong, leaving me a gift hidden in a toolbox that my own son threw away like junk. Stephen thought he could erase me with a pen stroke, but he forgot that his father was a man who saved everything, including the tool that would one day build his comeuppance. In the end, the only thing that never went out of bounds was the truth, and now that truth is set in fiberglass and robotics, running 18 holes a day all summer long. Have you ever discovered a dark secret about someone you trusted completely? How did you handle it? Let me know in the comments. And if you believe that justice should come with a side of miniature golf and a jester hat, hit that subscribe button and ring the bell. I will be back next week with another story of betrayal and backbone. Until then, keep your eye on the ball.